Hey guys, it's Monique here, and today we're going to be talking about how to land a job off of an interview. So, if you want to learn more about getting a job solely based off the interview, keep watching. So, in order to do well at an interview, you have to be confident. So, in this video, we're going to be going over how to gain confidence at an interview, how to gain confidence prior to even stepping foot and meeting that employer. And the first thing you're going to need to do to gain that confidence is research. You're going to need to research that company that you apply to. You're going to need to know as much as you can about that company, about the supervisor, about the director, about the employees, about the culture prior to even going in for an interview. Now, this channel is solely based off of my experiences in the law, so I can't really speak to the specifics of other careers and fields, but there is a general formula when it comes to research and being confident in an interview. Like I said, you want to look online, talk to people who've worked at the company if you can. I know a lot of us, we're just applying based off ads we see on Indeed or ZipRecruiter or Monster. So you really don't have the opportunity to talk to anybody who works at the company. But if you do have that opportunity, maybe you know a cousin or a friend or some other family member or distant associate who works at the company, try to talk to them, pick their brain. That's the best way you're going to be able to find out information because that person's going to have firsthand knowledge of the ins and out of that company. But if you're like a normal person, like 90% of the world, and don't have that insight, you're going to want to check online. You're going to want to do as much research as possible. You're going to want to figure out, if you can, who's going to be interviewing you. When it comes to me and going on interviews, I always ask the person who's setting up the interview, whether that be the office manager or the HR individual who reaches out to me, I ask them, who from the company is going to be interviewing me? I ask that question because I know that once I obtain that information, I can pinpoint what I need to be looking for in terms of research. Because I love to go into an interview and have personal conversations with the person who's interviewing me based on their bio on the website or based on maybe an article they published or posted that's on the website. And so you want to do that initial research so that you have a good basis as to what type of individual, company, culture you're essentially going to be walking into. So, first things first is research. Peruse the internet. Talk to family members and friends if applicable. Talk to people who are in the same field of career that you're trying to get into. You may not have the opportunity to necessarily talk to individuals who work at the company prior to your interview, but if you have the opportunity to talk to people who are in that same area um, of employment, then they can give you a general basis as to what to expect, what type of questions to ask at the interview, and ultimately what to say at an interview, and maybe what's going to be asked of you. So you want to do that initial research and be as thorough as possible. So by the time that you get there, you're already feeling confident, you're feeling good because you know what you're walking into. So the next thing that you're going to want to do when you get to that interview is you're going to want to make sure you look the part. That is going to heighten your confidence level. There's an old saying, and it goes, if you look good, you'll feel good. And if you feel good, you'll do good. And if you do good, you'll get paid good. And that is so true. So if you go in looking the part, looking groomed, looking put together, you're going to feel good. And confidence is just going to exude solely based off how you look. So you want to go into the interview with, you know, your hair done. You want to go in the interview dressed up as much as possible. If it's a corporate job, obviously you're going to want to wear a suit. Even if it's not a corporate job, you want to clean up nicely so that you're showing this employer that you mean business, that you're taking this seriously. I don't care if you're going in on an interview to be a plumber. You're going to want to look your best because first impressions are everything. And when it comes to interviews, the employer wants to see that you're taking this seriously. And in order to show you're taking it seriously without even saying anything is is how you're dressed, it's how you look, it's how you present yourself to that employer physically. And you know, a lot of the times these employers are judging you before you even say a word based off how you look. And so you want to go in there looking sharp, looking like you care about your appearance. I'm not saying that you have to have on the most expensive clothing and wear a three-piece suit or a ballroom gown. I'm not saying you have to dress up like that. But a nice blazer, if you don't want to wear a full blown out suit, a nice blazer, some nice slacks, a nice pencil skirt, a nice dress. I mean, within reason, you want to make sure you're also dressed appropriately. You don't want to wear a short dress or anything like that, but you want to look professional. You want to look like you're well put together. You want to look like you got up and showered. You got up and you did your hair. You got up and did something. You don't want to look like you just rolled out of bed, right? Because then no one's going to take you seriously, and they're going to be like, "Well, why are you here? If you can't dress up and groom yourself for an interview on the first day, and this is my first impression, how can I expect that you're going to do so when we have customers and clients coming in?" You know what I mean? So you want to show them, put your best foot forward and show that employer that you mean business, that you're taking this seriously, and that you can clean up nicely. Now, I'm not saying that every single day after your interview and after you get the job, you need to dress up. No, there will be appropriate times for when you need to, but the interview stage or the interview process should be you showing that employer that this is what I'm capable of bringing to the table. And once you do that, I'm sure the employer, and I can attest to this, the employer is going to have so much more respect for you because they're going to be like, wow, this person really is taking this seriously. Wow, this person really cleans up nicely. And this is without even saying a word. This is just solely based off first impressions, your physical appearance. So you want to make sure that you're dressed the part. You want to make sure that you're groomed. Hair's cut, hair's done, beard is groomed or shaved off, whatever I'm not saying change yourself. You don't have to necessarily change your hair. You just want to make sure it looks professional, whatever that may be to you. Don't change yourself, but try to put your best foot forward in looking as professional as possible at the interview. The next thing that you're going to need to do is make sure you know what's on your resume. And I know that may seem like obvious, but some people really don't know what's on their resume. So first and foremost, your resume should be a true and accurate depiction of the experience that you have. You should not be lying on your resume by any means. But it's really also important to know what's on there. When I first started interviewing, I used to bring my resume with me, and I would literally go along with the employer as they were asking me about my experience. But now that I've done this for so long, I don't bring my resume with me anymore because I know exactly what's on there. So when the employer asks me about a specific description or experience that's cited on my resume, I know how to answer it. I know exactly what they're talking about because I know it's on there. Like I have my resume memorized at this point. And so I'm not saying you need to memorize it in landing your first job or when you go on that first interview. But at some point, you should know exactly what's on there. It's okay to bring it the first couple of times. I don't think employers look down upon that or frown upon that. But if you've been working in the field, in whatever area of employment you're working, for X amount of years and you're still bringing your resume with you, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's just unnecessary. And it almost comes across as you don't know what's on your resume because why do you need to bring it? The employer already has a copy of it. So you really just want to make sure you know exactly what's on that resume so that when the question is asked, when a specific question is asked about your employment or your experience, you're able to answer it with confidence because you know what's on there. You know what you did. See, the employer doesn't know more than you in terms of what you did. That employer is just solely asking you questions based off what he sees on that piece of paper, what he or she sees on that piece of paper. But they don't know more than you know. And so only you know more than anyone else in that room. So you want to make sure that you have that resume memorized, if not word for word, a good grasp of what's on that resume, so that when you're questioned, you're able to easily answer the questions and talk about your experience. I think employers, at least in my experience, employers really like that I'm able to give them a full synopsis or background story on each place of employment, um, because it's almost as if I worked at these places yesterday, because that's how good I am with memorizing documents pertinent to me, particularly my resume. And so you want to get to that point where the employer asks you a question about one of your jobs and you're able to easily talk about it, talk about what you did there, because the employer ultimately wants to know what you did there, what experience you had. Because he or she's trying to figure out what they can do with you, where they can place you in their company. And so you want to be able to answer those questions, kind of anticipate those questions and answer them through the question of, tell me about this job. So you're only able to you will only be able to do that if you know what's on there. And so you want to get in the practice of memorizing that resume. And like I said in the previous video, your resume really shouldn't be more than a page long anyway. So it's not like you're really having to memorize a whole book of experience or a whole book of, information. This is your own pertinent experience, and you should be able to memorize it, so when you get to the interview, you're able to smoothly and accurately talk about what you did there. And finally, you want to be humble in an interview, but you also want to show that employer that you're valuable. And this is the most tricky part. This is something that I still struggle with, because it's like, how do I be humble but also confident at the same time? And it's a fine line between the two, because sometimes the confidence can come across as arrogance when we don't mean it to. So you want to be as gracious as possible. Lots of thank yous, lots of smiles. You never want to down talk a prior employer. If you've never had an employer before, then you're fine. But if this is like your second, third, and so on job, never want to down talk a prior employer. It's okay to be honest and talk about why you left, because 9 times out of 10, if you're coming from another employer, this new employer that's interviewing you is going to ask you why you left your prior job, which I think is a fair question, because I want to know why you left. Why are you coming here? And do I have to worry about you leaving this job? So that's a fair question. Be honest, tell the truth, but do it in a respectful manner. Don't down talk. Don't play down the prior employer. That's not a good look, because that employer that's now interviewing you is going to look at you like, wow, if you're willing to talk bad about your prior employer, what will you say about me if you don't stay here? So you don't want to do that. But going back to being humble and confident, you want to, like I said, make sure you're smiling, make sure you're saying thank you, make sure you're saying you're appreciative for even having an interview. And this goes back to the research that, I've heard so much about this company. You guys are a respectable company. I'm excited to, if I'm able to get this position, I'm excited to see what I can bring to the table. Like, you just want to be really, really, really gracious. But at the same time, you don't want to come across as begging, because you're not begging. You want to also make sure that employer knows that you have options. Now, I'm not saying go in the interview and lie and say, well, I have an interview tomorrow with this company and an interview Thursday with that company and an interview Friday with this. I'm not saying lie about it, but also, don't beg and don't settle. So if during that interview the employer asks you what your salary range is, be honest and upfront about what you want. Don't be scared and think, well, I don't know if I have enough experience to ask for this amount of money. No, you decided in your head prior to this interview that you were going to ask for this specific amount. So don't backtrack later. When you applied for the job, because you felt as though you had enough value to apply and maybe get the job. So don't backtrack later and get scared or intimidated by some of the questions asked during the interview and think that you're not worth or worthy of the position. No, you're worthy of the position. Even if you don't have all of the experience that they've asked you for, you're still worthy of the position because you bring something different to the table. So you want to make sure that you relay that to the employer, that you're bringing something different to the table, but also are very gracious for the opportunity to be interviewed. And we're going to get into the specifics of that in a different video because I think that in and of itself can be an entire video. But you want to make sure, like I said, you're being gracious, but you're also confident about what you bring to the table. Employers love that and they respect that. Not arrogant, but confident. And so, like I said, we're going to do a whole separate video on that because that in and of itself is very tricky and it's kind of like a game. And so we're going to go over tips and hints in that regard. But I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, like it, comment, share it, and I will see you guys in the next one.